Today, we will discuss the impact of growing up with emotionally unavailable parents. Whether your parents were emotionally unavailable because they were unwilling or unable due to external circumstances doesn't matter. The impact it has on our mental well-being is still the same. We will talk about what behaviors point to emotionally unavailable parents, what we may have experienced as a result of being raised by unavailable parents, such as some of the physical and emotional symptoms that result from having unavailable parents, and finally, what we can do to start healing. Hi, my name is Micheline Malouf, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor. If you have not subscribed to my channel yet, please do so. I will be posting videos weekly to help you take charge of your mental health. Let's start by talking about some of the signs your parents were emotionally unavailable. Number 1, they are not able to attune to you and your emotions and needs. This means that they cannot be empathetic to you. They either lack the ability for empathy or don't feel comfortable with emotion. They want to gloss over whatever is happening and make your feelings go away rather than trying to sit with you, comfort you, teach you about feelings, and help you develop coping skills. An example of this is you come home from school after a bad day. You may look sad or overwhelmed, and although your parents may notice it, they make no attempt at communicating with you, or they tell you to grow up and get over it. They may minimize your feelings and your experiences. Number 2, they are self-focused and see connecting with you as a burden or a chore. They may have a lot of work to do or a lot on their plate, or maybe they have time but not the energy or the interest to connect with you. They may choose their work, their friends, their hobbies, or anything else over you, and they make no attempts at learning about you or your interests. They may not show up to important events, and if you do bring it up to them, they might minimize it or they might make excuses for their behaviors. Number 3, they use sarcasm each time you try to communicate with them about your feelings. If the feeling is not what they consider positive, they become defensive, even if the reason for the emotion you experience doesn't have anything to do with them. They may use small jabs, sarcasm, or jokes to deflect from your feelings. They may change the subject or resort to other means to get you to stop talking about your feelings. For example, you may say something like, "I've been feeling really sad after my breakup." And instead of responding with empathy and compassion, they might respond with something like, "Oh, come on, that was such a silly relationship." Or, "Well, good, now you don't have to answer to anyone." Or they may use some sarcasm, like saying something along the lines of, "I told you to stop eating those Funyuns. You probably scared them away with that bad breath." Number 4, they are distant from you in many ways. They don't try to bond with you, and they treat you as a visitor. They don't know what to talk to you about. They feel insecure and uncertain about how they should proceed with helping you along in life. They aren't validating even when you succeed. They may shrug it off or tell you, "Well, that's what's expected of you anyway." They downplay your hard work and they don't encourage you or celebrate you. Number 5, they're toxically positive. This means that they are only comfortable expressing what they consider to be good emotions, but dismiss, minimize, or try to get you right out of whatever they consider to be a bad emotion. They don't allow space for feeling down, and this is usually because they are so uncomfortable with their own feelings. Toxically positive parents may say things like, "It's not that bad," or "You'll get over it," or "It could be worse." Think happy thoughts. "It will all be fine." These statements can feel really invalidating and make you feel like something is wrong with you for just feeling those feelings. Number 6, the only emotion they might express is anger. Since they are so out of touch with their own emotions, they may mask everything as anger. They may yell, scream, give silent treatments, and use other unhelpful ways to get their point across to get you to get out of their way. Number 7, they're overly permissive. They let you rule your own life. There aren't any boundaries at home, and you're allowed to do whatever you want. And although this might sound nice at first, it can get in the way of any connection or structure. And it's usually done out of an inability to set or enforce boundaries or not having the time or the energy to be a parent. And finally, they don't use loving words or affection. They are uncomfortable with physical touch, even with their own children. And they don't say things like, I love you or I care about you. They may be silent near you or feel very uncomfortable when you initiate loving contact. If you're still watching this video, you're probably resonating with some of these behaviors. So let's talk about how they might show up for you, what happens to your mental health and your physical health as a result of this. Here are some symptoms to look out for. Number 1. Shame. Shame develops when we think that something is inherently wrong with us. When we are children, we don't have the information to know that our parents are unavailable. We can't make an assessment and say, they're really struggling with their mental health. Or, their parents just didn't teach them how to be emotionally present. Or even, my parents are just immature. Instead, we place the blame on ourselves. We believe our parents' lack of attunement is because somehow we are flawed. Number 2, feelings of not being enough. Because of the shame, feelings of not being enough seep into many aspects of our lives. We become insecure with ourselves, in relationships, and at work, and we may even question our intellect. We may result to giving up quickly when things get too difficult or working so hard to avoid slowing down and feeling. Number 3, people pleasing. We may have learned to please people at home with our parents. Because of shame, we begin to try to compensate for our feelings of not being enough. You might have become a parentified child, which means that you felt responsible for your parents' emotional and physical well-being. Maybe you got praised when you were a helper, or maybe your parents cut you some slack when you did things for them. So you begin to believe that to be accepted in the world, you must be a pleaser, a nurturer, and that you cannot put yourself first. Number 4, perfectionism. Since emotions were not allowed, you may have turned your attention to accomplishments. Maybe your parents bragged about your accomplishment to the neighbors, even though they may not have celebrated you when you brought them the news of these accomplishments. Either way, you begin to think that your self-worth lies within your accomplishments, and you become fixated on perfections in many aspects of your life. You have a hard time slowing down. Number 5, emotional numbness and dissociation. Your emotions were not welcome or validated, so you may have learned to dissociate or numb your feelings. You may not even be aware you have feelings, or you may have become angry at situations and experiences that are supposed to bring you feelings of relaxation. This is because relaxation never felt safe, and it might trigger all of those other emotions that you've numbed out to surface. Number 6, you might experience high levels of anxiety. Growing up with emotionally unavailable parents means that your emotional well-being was not a priority. This means that your body was constantly scanning the environment for emotional and physical threats. This puts your nervous system in a constant state of fight or flight. This becomes your norm. Even if you're an adult now and you're out of your parents' home, you may have become stuck in fight or flight because you learned early on that the world was not a safe place to be. Of course, this is not true, but it is your reality, which brings me to the last one. You have an inability to trust people. People were the source of your trauma. And if your own parents couldn't be emotionally supportive and attuned to you, you might wonder how a non-parental figure could be trusted. The truth is there are good people out there that can be attuned to you and can be loving and trusting, and we can find them. Of course, a good amount of awareness and emotional work needs to be done so that you can recognize who's good for you and who's not. So let's talk about the things that you can start doing now to start healing. Number 1, reparenting. Reparenting is giving yourself what you did not receive as a child. Give to yourself now and to your inner child what you so desperately needed to hear as a kid. We can do this in so many different ways, but we can start with self-validation. Validate your own emotions. When a feeling or a sensation or an emotion comes up, notice it, name it, validate your experience. For example, if you're irritable or annoyed at work, you can stop, notice what you're sensing in your body, and name it. Then see if you can tag on an accompanying emotion to it, such as, I'm feeling really annoyed and restless. Then take it a step further and see what's driving this. You can ask yourself questions like, what about this situation is making me feel tension, annoyance, and restlessness? At first, you might not receive an answer from yourself. This is normal, especially since you haven't been supported in this way throughout your life. You may feel disappointed or think, this won't work for me. If that happens, notice that, validate those feelings, and let yourself know that all of this requires persistence and time. Do this daily, and one day you'll start connecting with your full self. Remember, you have been programmed for years to numb your emotions and ignore yourself. So this process will take time. Next, I want you to give yourself time. Give yourself the time you never had, whether that's patience, to try out these tips for a while before dismissing them, or to try to spend some time with yourself doing something that you love. If you are someone that places a lot of weight on productivity, have a conversation with yourself about what you might be afraid will happen if you slow down. Remind yourself that you cannot be as productive and efficient when you are burnt out. You need rest time. You need to live your life fully. After all, why are we wanting to be successful in life in the first place? In other words, give yourself the time, the patience, and allowance for rest and play, something your parents probably ignored for themselves and for you. Next, build meaningful relationships with available people. When your trauma is caused by people, one of the most effective ways to heal is with people. By finding meaningful and healthy relationships, you can develop feelings of safety in the world again. A powerful tool to help regulate your nervous system is called co-regulation. Co-regulation happens when we feel safe and comfortable in the presence of another person, usually a safe person. If you grew up with emotionally unavailable parents, it's likely that your nervous system got dysregulated each time you were around your parents. And this is why people began to feel unsafe to you. When you find people that are secure, open, attuned to your emotions and needs, and have a genuine care for you, they can help regulate your nervous system. Next, I want you to grieve. I mentioned grieving in my last video. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it here. An important part of growth and healing means grieving what you missed out on as a result of having emotionally unavailable parents. The grief process looks different for everyone, and if you have access to therapy, I would highly recommend getting some help with this process. And finally, learn to set boundaries. One of the most important things we can do as we heal from our relational trauma is to set boundaries both with ourselves and with those around us. We can set boundaries with ourselves around productivity, rest time, and self-care. And we can set boundaries with others by being selective of who we choose to spend time with, who gets certain parts of us, and how we are talked to. What kind of relationships do we want? Make an assessment of those in your life. Which relationships do you want to cultivate? Which relationships no longer serve you? Then put more energy into those that value you and respect you and your boundaries, and distance yourself from those that are disrespectful or relationships that you have outgrown. Remember, it's totally okay to outgrow people and relationships. Take the lessons you've learned from those relationships and move forward into your new chapter. I hope that you found this video helpful and that you got some awareness into your childhood and things that may have resulted in some of the symptoms that you're experiencing. And I hope that the tips I provided can help you move forward, or at least start the healing process. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time.